The humble employee takes her daughter to work. What the millionaire did will leave you speechless. Melissa Thompson's heart raced as she walked into the colossal black building that towered over her like a giant watching a tiny ant. She was just a regular employee, a humble worker at Technex Corp. But today, she held her daughter's hand tightly. Little Sophie looked up at the gleaming glass facade, her innocent eyes wide with wonder. "Mom, is that where the millionaires work?" she asked, her voice booming with curiosity. The air felt charged with anticipation, something electric that made the hairs on the back of Melissa's neck stand up. Little did they know, this day would change everything. As they stepped into the elevator, the doors slid shut, and the walls seemed to thrum with hidden whispers. "Did you hear about the millionaire who turned into a recluse?" a stranger murmured, and Melissa couldn't help but lean closer, straining to catch the story. "He vanished a week ago. Rumor has it he made a deal." Nobody knows about the energy wrapped around them like a shroud, thickening the air as questions bubbled in Melissa's mind. Each ding of the elevator filled her with a mix of dread and excitement. When they finally reached the top floor, the atmosphere shifted. The hallways were adorned with art pieces that portrayed confusion and chaos, each brush stroke resonating with stories untold. Then came the first strange element, an overwhelming scent of something sweet and metallic mixed with freshly polished wood. Melissa's throat tightened. What were they hiding behind these walls? "Stay close, Sophie," she urged, feeling a knot form in her stomach. The office buzzed with a peculiar energy, the employees moving like they were part of a strange dance, each focused on a task only they understood. It felt surreal and unsettling. Suddenly, just as Melissa thought she'd gotten used to the rhythm, a chilling scream echoed down the hall. It sliced through the air, freezing her in place. "What was that?" Sophie whispered. Melissa's heart hammered. She wanted to turn away to hide, but something pulled her forward, an undeniable curiosity. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect." As they stepped forward, the sound of commotion grew louder. In the center of the chaos stood a tall man, his expensive suit looking out of place amidst the panic. He gripped a piece of paper tightly like it was a lifeline. With wild eyes, he looked around as if he was searching for someone or something. Melissa's pulse quickened. Was he the millionaire? What had he found that drove him to this brink of despair? Her head spun with questions. What was happening here? Why did it feel like they had just walked into the dark heart of a hidden storm? Suddenly, Sophie tugged at her arm, pointing toward a door at the end of the hall. "Mom, look." As Melissa turned, she saw a glimmer of light escaping from the slightly ajar door, as if something or someone was calling to them from inside. The intensity of the moment buzzed around her like a swarm of bees, threatening to pull them in. Without thinking, she reached for the door, her hand hovering above the handle. What lay beyond, waiting for them? As Melissa's fingers grazed the cool metal of the door handle, a shiver ran down her spine. Every instinct screamed at her to pull away, to retreat from whatever shadows lurked behind the door. Yet Sophie's curiosity was infectious. Her daughter's small hand clenched Melissa's with a mix of excitement and apprehension. "Mom, can we see what's inside?" Sophie urged, her eyes sparkling with wonder. For a moment, time seemed to freeze as the noise of panic further down the hall faded into a haunting whisper. Bracing herself, Melissa turned the handle and pushed the door open. It creaked ominously, revealing a dimly lit office filled with high-tech machinery. Lights blinked rhythmically, casting eerie shadows across the room. A mahogany desk, cluttered with papers, dominated the space, but what drew Melissa's gaze was the enormous monitor displaying frantic graphs and charts that fluctuated wildly. As if alive, sudden shouts echoed once more from outside the room, yanking her attention back. Something felt wrong, something deeper than the chaos that swirled in the air of Technex Corporation. She stepped inside cautiously, and as she did, the door behind her clicked shut. Panic surged through her as she glanced back, but Sophie was still at her side, wide-eyed and clutching her mother's leg. What is happening, Mommy? Wait a minute, Melissa whispered. She approached the desk, her heartbeat thunderous in her ears. A piece of paper caught her eye, half crumpled and stained with what looked like coffee, or was it something darker? She picked it up cautiously and began to read. The words struck her with a sense of urgency. Project Ether. Final phase. Bring Sophie. A cold wave of realization washed over her. What did they want with her daughter? Was this the deal the stranger had spoken of? Mom, I don't like it here. Sophie's voice trembled beside her, and Melissa turned to see her daughter's innocent face twisted in worry. The innocence melted away with the gravity of the situation, and motherly instinct kicked in. Before she could respond, the flat screen behind her flickered to life, displaying a man she recognized, the elusive millionaire, Richard Hawthorne. His expression was grave, eyes darting with urgency as he faced the camera, his voice shaking slightly. If you're watching this, it means the plan has gone into effect. We underestimated the consequences and now our lives are at stake. Melissa's breath caught in her throat. The lines he spoke felt like a warning shot. Confusion twisted with dread at what the plan entailed. Sophie, we need to get out, she muttered. A sudden sense of urgency propelling her back toward the door. But as she reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. Panic flared inside her. It's locked, she exclaimed, her heart racing as she tugged at it desperately. What's going on? From the other side of the door, footsteps grew louder, and voices converged into indistinguishable shouts. The stillness of the room took on an oppressive weight. They know we're here, Melissa whispered, fear creeping into her bones. We have to hide. A shadow passed over the small window in the door, and she quickly ducked under the desk, pulling Sophie down with her. They huddled in the darkness, holding their breath, the tension wrapping around them like a vice. What was happening in Technex Corp? Who were these forces that now played with their fates? Melissa could only pray for escape as the figures outside moved closer, their voices sharp and angry. The clock was ticking. The moment of truth was fast approaching. Would they uncover the truth within these walls? Or would they be the next victims of a deadly game? The door rattled. Just then a voice echoed through the room, sending a chill down her spine. Find them. Now. What would come next? Melissa's heart raced as the command echoed ominously in the cramped space under the desk. She held Sophie tighter, wishing she could absorb her daughter's innocence and shield her from the horrors surrounding them. What did those voices want? Who were they, and why did they seem focused on them? A fresh wave of fear washed over her as she heard the footsteps draw closer. Faint whispers flitted around the room, spilling secrets in hushed tones, growing louder with each passing second. Are you sure they came this way? One voice asked, panicked and sharp. It was followed by the deeper tone of another. Search every room. They can't get away. The project depends on it. What project? The question tore through Melissa's mind like a lightning bolt. Her grip tightened on Sophie, who looked up at her, confusion etched into her tiny features. Mommy, I'm scared, she whimpered, the terror in her voice fracturing Melissa's heart. Sure, it's okay. Just a little longer, Melissa whispered back, reassuring herself as much as Sophie. Every instinct screamed at her to fight, to protect, to escape. She glanced toward the door, now a looming barrier between them and whatever horrors awaited behind them. A sudden clatter sent her nerves soaring. A cold sweat broke out along her brow. Someone had bumped into something in the office next door. The footsteps accelerated, and desperation clawed at her chest. She had to find a way out before it was too late. Then, as if summoned by her inner turmoil, a sliver of hope glimmered in the chaos. On the desk above them, a tiny laptop remained partially open, flickering screens illuminating the underside of the desk in a ghostly glow. A spark ignited within her. If she could access it, maybe she could discover something vital, something that could help them escape. Sweetheart, stay here and be quiet, she instructed Sophie quietly, her resolve hardening like armor. Holding her breath, she slipped out from under the desk, her heart pounding as she stretched toward the laptop. Fingers trembling, she flipped it open and quickly tapped the power button. The screen whirred to life, and as she waited for the login page to load, the thud of footsteps grew louder, punctuated by urgent commands outside the door. I want every corner checked. They can't hide forever. Melissa's pulse quickened. With each moment the danger escalated. but the laptop prompted her for a password. Panic seized her as she realized the time was slipping away. Come on, she mumbled, running through every conceivable combination she could think of. Suddenly, a sound behind her made her freeze. Shuffling feet stopped just outside the door. The lock rattled again, the voices merging into a chorus of intent. Miller, check the windows. A chill climbed up her spine. They were close. Too close. Exhaling slowly to steady herself, she slammed her palms against the keys in frustration. Before she could think, she pressed one last button just as the door handle began to turn. The monitor flashed brilliantly, revealing a series of images, blueprints of Technex, maps of the building, and something darker, a list of names including hers and Sophie's. No, she gasped, the weight of the reveal crashing down around her. Before her mind could process the implications, the door burst open. Panic flooded her veins as she leaped up, shielding Sophie behind her. The silhouetted figure filled the doorway, and a chilling grin crossed his face. Finally found you, he said, stepping into the dim light. With a protective instinct igniting in her soul, Melissa faced this new threat. Get away from us, she shouted, the fire of desperation fueling her refusal to back down. But as he moved closer, the weight of her words felt hollow against the encroaching terror. Little did she know, the grip of her reality was about to shatter completely, and the truth lurking in the shadows would change everything. What did they want with her daughter? And why had they set their sights on a humble employee? Just as the question hung in the air, a loud crash echoed from somewhere above, shaking the very foundations of Technex Corp itself. Was it coincidence? Or something far more sinister? Melissa's breath hitched, confusion and alarm mingling as the figure advanced. The room felt impossibly small, suffocating under the weight of his intent gaze. She tightened her hold on Sophie, their refuge now just a shield of flesh and will. Let us have a chat, shall we? The intruder's voice dripped with a predatory calm that sent shivers racing down her spine. Stay behind me, she hissed, staring defiantly into his cold eyes. Her heart screamed for her to run, but every muscle in her body felt paralyzed. Behind him, the sound of chaos erupted, shouting, movement, a cacophony of dread. Whatever had crashed above them was shaking loose more than just dust. It reeked of danger, of distraction. Look, I don't want to hurt you, he said, tilting his head like a predator sizing up prey. But if you don't cooperate, I can't make any promises. Panic surged anew. She needed a plan. While he focused on her, she grabbed the laptop and clutched it against her chest. Maybe there was something on there, something to bargain with. Mommy, Sophie whispered, her little voice trembling with fear. Shh, Melissa murmured back, never breaking her gaze from the looming figure. Suddenly, from behind him, another figure appeared. Taller, broader, an enforcer. His eyes scanned the room, catching sight of Melissa and Sophie. Melissa's heart dropped. Found them, the first man shouted, motioning for the new arrival. In an instant, she hurled the laptop across the room. Its screen shattered against the wall, the sound of breaking glass echoing like her shattering hopes. She couldn't let them get any information. Run, she yelled. Grabbing Sophie's hand, she bolted past the men, racing toward the window. Adrenaline pumped through her veins like a lifeline, urging her forward, and Sophie's footsteps were quick behind her. Each beat felt like a countdown. The new figure lunged, but Melissa ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding a grasping hand. She pushed all her weight against the window frame, a flimsy barrier separating them from freedom. Help! Sophie cried, voice pitched high in fear. Hold on, baby, Melissa grunted, adrenaline overtaking her senses. She was no longer just a humble employee. She was a mother fighting against everything. The window held, the glass refusing to budge. Panic swelled within her chest. They were trapped, no escape in sight, and the men were regrouping behind them. Don't just stand there. Get them, the intruder shouted, his voice filled with frustration. Melissa felt the ground shaking beneath her feet again. Was it more chaos from above? Whatever it was, it might be their only chance. The men hesitated for a moment, exchanging glances. Go for it, she screamed. Without waiting for a second thought, she turned, grabbing a nearby heavy stapler and throwing it at the closest man. It hit him solidly in the chest and he staggered back, caught off guard. Mommy, In that split second she snatched up Sophie, racing down the office hall, shoving past startled coworkers who were frozen in their seats. The building was in chaos and sirens blared heavily outside, loud enough to drown out her own heartbeat. Melissa knew she had to find an exit, but the panic in the corridors was thick. Small groups of people were huddled, fear spreading through the air like a contagious illness. "Help! Get help!" She yelled at a few horrified faces. But as she rounded a corner, she felt her world tumble again. Just ahead, two more figures stood blocking the way, eyes scanning for them. "Melissa! This way!" A voice cried from an open door at the end of the hallway. The man who had shouted her name wasn't one of the intruders. His desperation and determination glimmered through the madness. With a final surge, she darted toward the door, gripping Sophie tightly. As they neared, a voice behind her boomed in anger, "Stop them." Nothing mattered now but the instinct to survive. Before she could process it, she slipped through the door just as it slammed behind her. Heart hammering, she found herself and Sophie in a dim stairwell. But that safety was short-lived. Pressure descended upon her chest, a sense of terrible urgency. What awaited them at the bottom? "Mommy," Sophie whispered, her little hand still clutching Melissa's tightly. "I won't let anyone hurt you, I promise," she murmured fiercely. The pounding footsteps echoed behind them, and the realization hit hard: the chase was far from over. What was waiting at the bottom of the stairs? And would they manage to escape this nightmare alive? Melissa's heart was racing, each beat a primal drum echoing the sheer panic that gripped her. She hurried down the dim stairwell, dragging Sophie along, her little legs struggling to keep up. Every time she heard footsteps echoing behind them, her grip tightened on her daughter's hand. They reached a landing. The doorway at the bottom led into a stretch of darkness. A flickering fluorescent light buzzed overhead, casting eerie shadows that danced along the walls. Melissa squinted, praying the way was clear, that they weren't walking into a trap. "Stay close," she whispered, pulling Sophie in closer, feeling the warmth of her tiny body next to her. "Mommy, I'm scared," Sophie said, her voice small, breaking through the tension. "I know, sweetheart. Just trust me, okay?" Melissa forced a smile, her heart aching. With each step down, she felt a weight pressing on her chest. The footsteps had quieted. Was it too quiet? She glanced back, straining to hear any hint of pursuit. Had they lost them? Or were the men lurking just around the corner, waiting for the moment she let her guard down? Suddenly, the distant sound of shouting echoed from above. "They went this way. Find them." The urgency in the men's voices reignited Melissa's adrenaline. The chase wasn't over. It was only beginning. "Mommy!" Sophie tugged at her arm. "Stay right here," Melissa hissed, peering down the staircase. With no time to hesitate, she pressed on, fear and resolve flooding her senses. They reached the bottom. Melissa swung open the door and stepped into a narrow hallway that stretched before them into murky darkness. The air was cold, and a chill crept down her spine. Colors blurred in her vision. Pulsing shadows from the flickering lights seemed to mock her distress. She could feel the presence of danger looming, could sense it creeping closer. "Where are we?" Sophie asked, her innocence in the midst of terror hitting Melissa hard. "Just a little further, honey," she whispered, urgency overriding her fear. Pushing forward, they stumbled into a maintenance room cluttered with forgotten supplies, a tangle of mops, brooms, and ominous tools that only fueled the dim nature of their escape. Melissa's eyes darted around the cramped space, searching for something, anything to defend them. Then it hit her. A heavy-duty fire extinguisher hung on the wall. Could be their lifeline. She grabbed it, feeling its weight in her hands. The cold metal felt steadying, even as dread gnawed at her stomach. A sudden loud crash resounded down the hall, and panic surged through her veins like ice. They were coming. There was no time left. "We need a plan." "Mommy," Sophie whimpered. "Listen to me, honey." Melissa knelt down to her level, forcing their eyes to meet. "If they come in, I want you to run for the back exit. Do you understand?" "I'm scared." "I know." Melissa desperately glanced at the tools scattered across the room. "But this is it. It's now or never. Can you trust me?" A hesitant nod from Sophie. The sounds of footsteps grew louder, nearing the door. Melissa could feel her heart in her throat. Then, without warning, the doorknob rattled and the door was thrust open. Adrenaline kicked in like a tidal wave. She raised the fire extinguisher, poised for action. While Sophie stood frozen beside her in an electrifying moment, Melissa took a deep breath, ready for whatever was coming their way. She didn't know how they would emerge from this alive, but she had one fierce resolve in her heart. "I won't let them take you," she screamed, the fierce declaration ripping through the air between them. The figures stood silhouetted in the doorway, their faces unreadable under the harsh light. And just like that, the moment had arrived. Would she make it out with Sophie? Or was this the end of their desperate flight? Melissa's heart thundered in her chest as the door burst open, revealing three looming shadows. Their faces were tinged with malice, and their eyes glinted with an unsettling hunger. Adrenaline coursed through her veins, sharpening her focus, every instinct screaming for her to act. "Get back!" she yelled, brandishing the fire extinguisher like a shield. The cool metal felt solid in her grip, but the reality of their confrontation sank in like lead. She could see a flicker of surprise on their faces, giving her a sliver of hope. "Move aside, lady," one of the men growled, stepping forward, his hands flexing with impatience. "No, you're not taking her," Melissa spat back, her voice a mixture of fear and defiance. She could feel the weight of Sophie's tiny hand still gripping hers, grounding her in the fight. With a swift motion, she squeezed the handle of the extinguisher, unleashing a cloud of white powder that enveloped the figures. The men staggered back, blinking and coughing, their momentary confusion fueling Melissa's resolve. "Now Sophie, run!" she shouted, pushing her daughter toward the back exit, a faint outline illuminated by the flickering emergency lights. But Sophie hesitated, fear etched across her little face. "Mommy, please. Go." Melissa's heart tore at the command, but she knew it was the only chance. Sophie stumbled toward the exit, her small figure disappearing into the darkened hallway. Every moment felt like an eternity, and a swell of guilt shot through Melissa, but there was no choice. The men coughed, waves of white powder starting to settle. Composure returning, one of them growled angrily, "Get her." Melissa tightened her grip on the fire extinguisher, her mind racing for the next move. With a determined scream, she charged forward, aiming for the nearest man's legs. She swung the extinguisher with all her might, catching him off guard. He toppled over, but more were coming, each more furious than the last. The shrill echo of boots pounding down the hallway seemed to grow louder, drowning out the chaos in her head. She needed to move. She turned, sprinting after Sophie, who was too far ahead in the shadows. "Stay close," she pleaded, her voice trembling with fear. But all she could hear was the sound of her own footsteps and the distant shouts of the men behind her. As Melissa raced through the darkness, she caught sight of the back exit. The dim light at the end flickered like a distant promise. Hope surged within her, but it was quickly shattered by the sound of heavy footsteps right behind her. "Get back here. You can't run forever," one of the men bellowed, his voice booming like a thunderclap, reverberating off walls and tightening the knot of fear in her gut. Sophie was still not in sight, and every second stretched into an agonizing eternity. Melissa pushed herself harder, willing her legs to take her faster. A world of instincts screamed at her she couldn't lose her daughter. Not now, not ever. Just as she burst through the door, she collided with someone. The familiar contours of a warm body. "Mommy!" Sophie gasped, her eyes wide with fear. "I have you!" Melissa cried out, wrapping her arms around her daughter. But then doubts crept in. Were they safe? In that split second, a fiery shadow burst through the doorway. The men were not far behind. "Run now," Melissa barked, pulling Sophie forward, pushing against the surge of dread that threatened to pull her under. They emerged into the open air, but destiny had other plans. As they stumbled onto the chaotic street outside, a black SUV sped toward them, tires screeching as it prepared to stop. Melissa froze, caught between terror and instinct. Who was in the vehicle? Friend or foe? Before she could process further, the door swung open. "Get in!" A voice shouted urgently from inside, startling both mother and daughter. Should she trust them? The clock was ticking, the past winding down like a frantic clock. In that breathless moment, the decision loomed before her. What would she choose? And what lay ahead in this new chaos? Melissa's chest tightened as she hesitated, knowing the threat was right behind them. "Mommy!" Sophie whimpered, looking up at her with wide, terrified eyes. Let us go. Melissa finally shouted, grabbing Sophia's hand tightly. They were stepping into the unknown once again. What awaited them inside the SUV? Allies or enemies? Only time would reveal the truth. The moment Melissa and Sophie jumped into the SUV, the air was thick with tension. The door slammed shut, sealing them away from the nightmarish chaos outside. Melissa's heart raced even faster now. Who were these people? Would they be friends or a new wave of danger? Drive. The voice inside demanded. The driver didn't need to be told twice. The SUV lurched forward, tires screeching against the pavement, pushing the vehicle into a blur of streetlights and shadows. Mommy, who are they? Sophie whispered, her small body trembling against Melissa. I don't know, honey, Melissa replied, her own voice shaking. She turned to see the driver's face illuminated by the dashboard lights, a young man, maybe in his 20s, with sharp features and an intense gaze. His knuckles were white as they gripped the steering wheel, and determination was etched into his expression. It's going to be okay, he assured them, but Melissa could hear the nervousness in his tone. Was he trying to convince them or himself? Then a sharp bang echoed from behind them, and the SUV jolted violently as something struck the back. Melissa's breath caught in her throat. What was that? She gasped. Just hold on, he shouted, slamming the accelerator down. The vehicle lurched forward again, speeding down the street as sirens blared in the distance. Melissa's mind raced. The three men, they were still out there, and they wouldn't give up easily. Where are we going? She demanded, gripping the seat. To the safe house, the driver answered, eyes glued to the road. You'll be safe there. The safe house? Why would I trust you? She snapped, frustration bubbling up. How could she believe him when everything in her screamed to be cautious? I understand, he said, his voice softening. But right now it's the only option. You need to stay ahead of them. Just as Melissa was about to respond, Sophie tugged at her arm, panic replacing her earlier bravado. Mommy! I can hear them. I can hear them. Melissa's heart dropped. She leaned closer to her daughter. What do you mean, sweetheart? The bad men. They're coming. I can hear their voices. Sophie whimpered, eyes wide, darting around as if expecting them to appear at any moment. Just breathe, darling, Melissa said, pulling her closer. But it was hard to swallow her own fear. Suddenly, the driver swerved into an alley, tires screeching again as he forced the SUV into a sudden halt. This isn't safe enough, he declared, glancing nervously in the rearview mirror. We need to get out now. Get out? What do you mean? Melissa's voice flew up an octave. He fumbled with something under the dashboard. Trust me. We need to go. Before she could argue, he opened his door and jumped out. Melissa quickly unbuckled Sophie, both of them peering out into the dim alley where the shadows pressed in like silent watchers. They stepped out together, Melissa keeping a protective hand around Sophia's shoulder. Get behind me, she whispered, scanning the area. Just then, a noise broke the stillness, a heavy thud followed by muffled voices growing louder. Come on, the driver called, urgency cracking his voice as he glanced down another dark path. This way. Hesitation gripped Melissa as she watched the boy move quickly away from the vehicle. He was their best option, yet every instinct screamed it might be a trap. Mommy, Sophia's small voice broke through her thoughts, eyes wide, filled with fear. Let us go, Melissa answered, steeling herself as she led her daughter toward the shadows, the sounds of pursuit echoing from behind. Each rapid heartbeat reminded her that time was running out. Racing through the alleyway, she could only pray they would find a way out of this nightmare. What answer lay in the dark? And what dangers lurked behind them? As Melissa plunged deeper into the unknown, a question loomed larger than ever. Could they escape the wrath of the hunters, or were they already too late? Panic coursed through Melissa as she ducked into the narrow alley, dragging Sophie along. The harsh glow of the streetlights barely pierced the darkness, and fear gripped her heart. Each step felt more treacherous than the last, each echo of their footsteps resonating like a countdown. Mommy, Sophie whispered, her small hand trembling in Melissa's grip. Stay close, Melissa whispered back, every instinct on high alert. They followed the driver, whose shadow darted ahead as he navigated through trash cans and debris. The muffled voices grew louder, sharper. Melissa's stomach twisted. The men were getting closer. How far until we're safe? She muttered, But the driver didn't he answer. He glanced back at them, his eyes wide. This way. He turned sharply, heading toward a door half hidden behind stacks of wooden pallets. Is that just trust me? Without waiting, he yanked the door open, revealing a decrepit storage room cluttered with rusting tools and boxes. An odd feeling sliced through the mayhem. The scent of must and dampness reminded her of abandoned places from childhood. Inside, he urged, practically beckoning them like a lifeline. Melissa hesitated, a shiver crawling down her spine. What if it's a trap? Before she could protest further, Sophie tugged her sleeve. Mommy, I don't want to go back. Please. The desperation in her daughter's voice shattered Melissa's hesitation. Okay, we're going in. The driver slipped inside first, another ghostly glance over his shoulder, promising urgency. They entered, and he slammed the door shut just as a loud accusation echoed through the alley. Where are they? The intensity of that voice made Melissa's blood run cold. The hunters were close, too close. The driver led them deeper into the room, finding a small window. We need to be quiet, he breathed, scanning the grimy glass for sounds outside. The shouts of the men grew more distinct. They'll be here any second. Sophie's trembles escalated. Mommy, what are we going to do? Melissa knelt down. I don't know, but we're going to be okay. Promise. But her own heart thudded, thrumming loudly in her chest as she finished her sentence. The driver turned back, a sense of urgency in his eyes. We have to make a plan. If they find us here, can't we just leave? Melissa interrupted, her voice sharp. We need to run. Running isn't the answer. Not right now. He took a deep breath, glancing out the window again. We can't let them see us. They're looking for you, for Sophie. It's personal. Melissa's mind raced. How did he know? What do you mean? The driver's expression darkened, sweat glistening on his brow. Just trust me. I'll explain everything, but we have to stay hidden. As the voices outside faded momentarily, Sophie clung to Melissa, her small frame trembling. The driver used his phone's flashlight to survey the room, illuminating shadows that danced eerily. There's something we need to do. A way out, but it's risky. Risky? Just tell us. Melissa's voice trembled with tension. Your safety is connected to someone else, he said, drawing a deep breath. And it might change everything. What? Melissa asked, confused and angry. Just trust me. But as he spoke, the door creaked ominously behind them. Melissa's heart sunk. No more hesitations, they had to act now. The door rattled behind them and a flashlight beam shone through the crack. Stay down. The driver hissed, crouching beside them. Melissa held her breath, fear snaking around her throat. Questions spun mercilessly in her mind. Who was coming in? And would they survive another confrontation? As the door swung slowly open, revealing darkness cloaked in malevolent intentions, the moment hung in the air like a balloon nearing its limit. Who had followed them, and what would happen next? Melissa wrapped an arm around Sophie and braced for impact, knowing this was only the beginning of their brutal reality. What awaited them on the other side? The door creaked wider, and a silhouette emerged, framed by the dim light. A figure entered, tall and menacing, his features obscured by the shadows. Melissa's heart pounded like a drum in her chest. This was it. This was the confrontation she dreaded. Check the back. A voice growled from outside, urgency dripping from every word. The looming figure paused, tilting his head as if trying to catch a whisper on the wind. Sophie pressed her head against Melissa's shoulder, her tiny body trembling violently. Please be quiet, Melissa breathed, her voice barely above a whisper. She felt a weight of dread settle over her, cold and unyielding. The driver's eyes darted back and forth, calculating the moment. The intruder stepped fully into the room. The flashlight beam from his hand cast an eerie glow across the scattered tools and boxes, revealing a man with grimy jeans and a ripped sweatshirt. He was a silhouette of chaos, and he stalked towards them, one slow step at a time. Where are they? He shouted, a raw edge to his voice. His desperation cut through the musty air, sending shivers down Melissa's spine. It was clear he wouldn't give up easily. Panic gnawed at her insides and instinct screamed at her to act. The driver leaned closer. We can't stay here. Follow me, he hissed under his breath. Melissa hesitated but felt Sophie's grip tighten around her waist. Mommy, I'm scared. Me too, sweetheart. But we have to trust him, she urged, locking eyes with the driver. Where are we going? He pointed toward the back of the room, past stacks of forgotten tools and cobwebs. There's another way out. But we have to be fast. I think. The intruder's voice cracked like thunder. I heard something. Without another moment to lose, Melissa nodded to Sophie and gripped her hand. They followed the driver, hearts racing, praying they wouldn't be caught. They slipped past heavy boxes, taking care to keep their movements quiet. As they approached the back, Melissa caught a flicker of movement from the side. A second figure emerged, a partner in crime with a sinister grin. Got you in the corner now, don't we? He sneered, flicking his flashlight toward them. Melissa's heart sank. Run! She screamed, pulling Sophie along with her just as the driver hurled an old toolbox at the pair in the doorway. It clanged and crashed, sending a loud echo ricocheting off the walls. They darted to the back exit, the door creaking open to reveal the night sky, filled with swirling shadows and the distant hum of the city. Freedom beckoned. But the moment was fleeting. Get them! The first intruder bellowed, lunging toward the exit, voice filled with rage. Melissa surged forward, adrenaline coursing through her veins. They were outside, but the alley wrapped around them like a trap. Shadows danced in the corners, warning of the danger lurking just beyond their line of sight. Go, go, go! The driver urged as they bolted into the darkness. But the hunt was far from over. The men's voices faded momentarily, only to be replaced by the thudding of pursuers on their heels. Mommy, what is happening? Sophie cried, tears streaming down her little cheeks. Hold on tight. Melissa gasped, her breath coming in frantic bursts. Each step felt heavy, like running against the weight of the world. They didn't have a plan. They just needed to survive. The dark path twisted ahead, branches silhouetted against the moonlight. This was a chase, one that felt straight out of a nightmare. Just as they rounded the corner, a sharp scream pierced the night air, echoing loudly enough to stop Melissa in her tracks. Her heart seized in her chest as she turned, dread pooling in her stomach. Who is it? She whispered, fear curling around her like a chain. Keep going. The driver yelled, dragging them forward. But they were caught in a web of terror. A figure emerged from the shadows, eyes bright and familiar. Melissa. The name echoed in the night, triggering a rush of recognition and confusion. She froze, caught in the headlights of a reality she hadn't expected, and the weight of that word hung in the air. Like a stroke of fate. What had just awakened within her? And who was this new detonator in their already explosive scenario? Melissa. The voice was unmistakable as the figure stepped closer. Recognition struck like lightning. It was Edward, her old friend from college, the one who had left to chase his dreams in the tech industry. His presence felt surreal, like a mirage in a desert of chaos. What are you doing here? She gasped, torn between relief and confusion. I came to find you, he replied, urgency lacing his words. They're tracking you both. We have to go fast. Before she could respond, the shouts of their pursuers boomed from the shadows, a reminder that safety was a fleeting fantasy. This way, Edward urged, grabbing Melissa and Sophie's hands. They raced forward into a narrow alley, the walls rising like fortress gates around them. Sophie clung to Melissa's side, her small body quivering with fear. Is everything going to be okay, Mommy? Tears streamed down her face, each one a reminder of the terror they had endured. Yes, honey, I promise, Melissa replied, though her heart ached with the weight of uncertainty. Edward kept glancing behind them, ensuring they weren't being followed. The alley twisted and turned, each step a race against the clock. They exited onto a quiet street where dim light flickered overhead. Edward led them toward a rusty van parked at the curb. Get in, he shouted, urgency spilling from his tone. What's going on? Melissa demanded as they climbed inside. It's complicated, but we need to get you both to safety. I've been monitoring Technex, and what they're doing Project Ether is worse than I thought. They need Sophie for the final phase of their experiments. Melissa's chest tightened. You're saying they want to use her? Edward nodded, grave determination hardening his features. Yes, but I'm here to stop that. I have evidence and we can expose them. The roar of an engine echoed behind them, and Melissa's heart raced. They're coming. Let us go. Edward shouted, revving the engine. They sped off just as they saw dark figures flood into the street, shouting. The night unfolded, a chaos of city lights racing by. But the fear that churned in Melissa's gut wouldn't fade. Is this safe? She asked, glancing back at Sophie whose eyes mirrored her own terror. For now, Edward replied, eyes focused ahead, the determination burning under the surface. But we need to take some precautions. I have a place we can lay low for a while. In the relative safety of the van, time squeezed tight around them like a vice, every moment stretching into an eternity. We'll be okay, right? Sophie's voice was small, fragile. Melissa squeezed her daughter's hand, vowing silently to fight for her. We will be, she promised, her heart swollen with love and fierce protectiveness. You're stronger than you know, Melissa, Edward said, breaking through her thoughts. If we can get that evidence to the public, we can shut down the project and save children like Sophie from them. The weight of his words sank in. It was more than just escaping. It was about fighting back against a dangerous machine that preyed on the innocent, pulling every string to pull them into its grip. They pulled into an old unmarked warehouse at the edge of town. Inside, it smelled of dust and neglect. Shadows loomed in the corners. Stay close, Edward instructed, ushering them to the back of a dimly lit space with a computer setup that looked patched together from old parts. You'll want to see this, he said, typing fiercely into the keyboard. A moment later, the screen flickered to life, revealing documents and encrypted emails that told a tale of manipulation and deception. One file caught Melissa's breath, her and Sophie's names listed among those marked for experimentation. Sophie's little fingers grazed part of the screen, and Melissa took a moment to soften her grip around her daughter's shoulder. Sophie, this is what we need to show everyone. We're fighting for our freedom and many like you. Just as she settled into a rush of purpose, loud shouts echoed from outside, rattling around them. They found us! Edward exclaimed, panic tightening his voice. We need to stay calm and stick together, Melissa said, rallying her nerve. They'll be in here any moment, Edward declared, urgency in his voice mounting. We need to hide. He quickly ushered them toward a smaller room in the back. It's a safe spot, they want think to look here. Melissa nodded, confidence igniting her spirits. Together they squeezed into the cramped space, pressing against each other, heartbeats pulsing in unison as danger loomed. Outside, chaos erupted. Voices shouted, commands barked. Search every corner. They can't escape again. Melissa held Sophie close, whispered reassurances merging with their rapid breaths. You're brave, my love. We'll outsmart them together. And just as the door creaked open, revealing silhouettes crashing into the room, Edward sprang forward, a fearless guardian. Over here! He shouted at the figures, pushing them toward a makeshift exit. In one swift moment, the shadows lunged, but Melissa felt determination surge through her veins. With a strength she never knew she had, she bolted forward, dragging Sophie behind her, refusing to let fear dictate their reality any longer. The chase ignited, adrenaline fueling their desperate flight. They dashed out an escape hatch Edward had pointed out, realizing this would be their final gamble. Each thumping heart was a relentless drum, echoing against the empty walls, resonating with hope and fear. Will they break the cycle of terror encasing them? Will their voices ring out against the stranglehold of greed? Together they surged into the night, ready to face whatever lay ahead, no longer just a humble employee and her daughter, but warriors fighting for freedom. As they raced forward into the unknown, Melissa felt a spark igniting within, a fierce truth that would carry them through the darkness. This was not the end. It was the beginning. Now that you've seen the thrilling conclusion, you need to subscribe immediately to ensure you don't miss out on the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to keep us thriving in the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about what happens next. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible journey. Your support means everything, and only true fans understand its importance.